Next on Unsolved Mysteries, a woman investigating the murder of her close friend is attacked by a stalker. Could he be her friend's killer? When the wealthy owner of a remote private island dies, the ashes of an unidentified woman are found in his gardening shed. Who is she, and what happened to her? 22-year-old Matthew Chase makes a midnight trip to an ATM and vanishes. This bank video may hold the key to his disappearance. And this house on 37th Street may look perfectly normal, but looks are deceiving. Those who live here believe it's haunted. 5 stories with intriguing secrets and surprising revelations. I'm Dennis Farina, and this is Unsolved Mysteries. North Hollywood, California. A single gunshot draws Mel Green and several others to the parking lot of his office building. They find Mel's wife, Anita, in her car. She had been shot once in the head. After 2 days in a coma, Anita Green dies. Her friend, Michelle Samet, has written a book about the murder and now believes that the killer is stalking her.
The knowledge that this guy's out there, out on the streets, terrifies me every day, whether it's the person I think did it or not, because any person who did it knows that I know a lot about this case that they don't want me to know.
Anita Green had been murdered in broad daylight. Whoever shot her was ruthless and confident. Anita's friend, Michelle Samet, claimed that when she researched the shooting, the same killer began stalking her. This frightening case had begun years before, when Anita Green first met Mel Green. Anita worked as a bookkeeper in Mel's accounting firm. Both were married, but after a 7-year affair, they left their spouses and tied the knot. Anita's friends were shocked, not only because Mel weighed more than 500 pounds, but also because he convinced Anita to sign an outrageous prenuptial agreement.
Basically, there was a provision in it that he wore the pants in the family, and he was the supreme boss, the god, the absolute ruler, and if they ever had an argument or disagreement, he would automatically win just because of that role.
Anita became active at her synagogue as a refuge from the difficult marriage. Other than attending some services, Mel showed little interest. Anita provided conflicting accounts of her relationship with Mel.
Let's go. I'm late.
All right. She'd say she was afraid of her husband, but then she said, oh, you know, Mel, he's just a loudmouth. He likes to hear himself talk. He's a blowhard. He's not really going to do anything to me. She had all the classic symptoms of an abused woman, thinking they were in control, thinking that they knew what they were doing, but really frightened and scared.
Eventually, Anita was elected president of the synagogue. As a result, she and her rabbi spent a lot of time together, eventually becoming romantically involved. When Anita asked Mel for a divorce, he was furious.
I absolutely demand that my property is handed over to me. I have an extensive stamp and coin.
Despite his bitterness, Mel Green insisted that Anita continue to work at his accounting firm.
She has to work for me. The business depends upon it.
Mel was inconsistent. 1 minute, I don't need you, you're not worth anything, but the next minute he would absolutely be insistent she had to work for him.
Throughout the divorce proceedings, Green bombarded Anita and her lawyer with threatening letters. Only after Anita was murdered were the letters turned over to the police.
Melvin Green did send some letters where he threatened to kill Anita Green. In my mind, it just gave more credence to him being involved in her shooting.
So let me see if I understand. You were working at your dad's...
Detective Hernandez found 3 different witnesses to Anita's murder. One was a man who worked across the street from Green's firm. He observed Green coming out of the building minutes before Anita drove up in her red Corvette.
It's a door that is not used very often, so it was unusual to this witness across the street to see this. After he observed Melvin Green looking, he observed Anita Green turn the corner, closely followed by a motorcycle.
A second witness working on a nearby roof saw even more.
And what brought his attention was he heard a motorcycle arrive, parked on the wrong side of the street. He observed the individual approach Anita Green, fire 1 shot, immediately ran to his motorcycle, and at a high rate of speed, go northbound on the street.
Finally, a third witness helped police come up with this composite. He got a good look at the motorcyclist shortly after Anita's murder. Investigators began to suspect that Green had hired a hitman to kill his wife. Their suspicions were increased when they heard about Green's behavior at the hospital. Anita's friend, Phyllis Bolton, recalls a bizarre conversation with Mel moments after Anita died. Anita's body was still in the room.
I look pretty good, don't I? It's the new liquid diet that I'm on.
He was talking about how much weight he had lost and how good he had looked. It was absolutely nauseating. There was not one moment of remorse, not one tear shed. He was as talkative as if she was wide awake and sitting there watching us.
The day after Anita was shot, Detective Hernandez tried to interview Green at his office.
Detective, you stop right there. I can't talk to you. My attorney says I can't speak with anyone.
Why do you need an attorney?
Green refused to cooperate, but the investigation continued.
Talk to my attorney.
We were able to piece together the fact that Melvin Green specifically controlled the date and time Anita Green was supposed to be at his office. That would allow Melvin Green to have somebody hired to follow her and shoot her. And that's how Anita Green was shot.
Mel Green was eventually arrested for conspiring to kill his wife, even though there was no physical evidence tying him to the crime. The jury ruled that he had murdered Anita for financial gain. Green was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But the case was far from over. Green appealed, claiming that he was innocent and the hitman, whoever he was, remained at large. A few months after his conviction, a journalist, Michelle Samet, visited Green in a local jail where he was waiting to be transferred to a state prison. Against his lawyer's advice, Green agreed to be interviewed for Michelle's book.
Hello, Mel.
Hello, Michelle.
How are you doing?
I wanted to go in there with an open mind, and I started to listen to him. And for the first few weeks of our visits, I wasn't certain of anything anymore.
There's no connection. So there's more than one road to reasonable doubt.
But as our visits continued, Mel himself made me more certain of his guilt than ever before.
Michelle continued her investigation. There was one thing that kept nagging at her. How and when had Mel paid the hitman? Michelle claims that she uncovered evidence that Green sold off a $30,000 coin collection just 3 weeks before Anita was murdered. Michelle told the police about her discovery.
My innocence will come.
Michelle continued to interview Green. On one occasion, their session was interrupted by an unusual visitor.
This is a man I call my brother because he'd do anything for me. In fact, he's a homeowner because of me. You can wait outside.
Mel had visitors come every day during our visits. My visits were all day long. Mel had never asked me to leave during his visits before, and that alone I thought was unusual. And I went downstairs, and I went into my car and sat. I knew I'd have about a half hour until this guy came out. And my mind started to run away with me that this guy looked a lot like the police composite of Anita's shooter.
Michelle says that when the visitor left, he got on a motorcycle that looked exactly like the one driven by Anita's killer.
When I went back to the jail, I made a very stupid mistake. I said to Mel, I've got this theory.
You paid for the murder with the money from the coins you said Anita stole. She didn't steal them.
You're not gonna write that.
Michelle claims that when she told Green about her suspicions, he threatened her.
Nobody's gonna put those lies about me. If you end up dead after I make a call, you'll know who did it.
I knew Mel likes to talk like that. You know, this is just a blowhard, just a man talking. And I realized, God, how stupid can you be, Michelle? That's exactly what Anita said, and she's dead.
The next day, Green was transferred to a prison east of San Diego. From there, he sent a stream of frightening letters to Michelle.
He's threatened to harm my children. He's threatened to hurt me. But I couldn't stop because I knew I had the potential to find the answer.
Michelle says that over the next few months, someone began to stalk her. The front gate of her house was ripped from its hinges, and her house was vandalized. Then, in her driveway, an unidentified man hit her in the face, breaking her nose.
A lot of that has stopped now that the book has come out. But of course, you always live your life fearing that what you've uncovered might lead to some potential danger for your family.
Michelle believes that the man she saw visiting Green in jail was the same man pictured on the police composite. He has blonde hair, dark eyes, a muscular build, and may own a red or maroon Suzuki motorcycle. Mel Green's appeal was denied. Investigators think Michelle's theory concerning the gunman has merit, and they are anxious for new leads about his identity. Next, the story of a young man who went to deposit his paycheck at a local ATM and never returned. Los Angeles, California, 11:45 p.m.
Oh, I forgot to deposit my check.
It wasn't until 22-year-old Matt Chase returned home from dinner with his roommate, Teresa, that he remembered he needed to deposit his paycheck. Matt borrowed Teresa's car and promised to pick up some cat food on the way home.
Okay, see you in a few minutes. It should have taken Matt approximately 10-15 minutes to run the errand. The bank was about 2 blocks from our home, and normally he walked. And that particular evening, he'd taken my car, so at the most, 15 minutes would be sufficient.
But by the next morning, Matt still had not come home. Teresa and her other roommate, Steve, called the bank, pretending to be Matt.
Hello, my name is Matthew Chase.
They wanted to find out if he had used his bank card the night before.
There have been transactions, great.
The bank said that he had.
Okay.
A couple of times.
What time they were made, what day, and...
Steve and Teresa called the police.
A light came on indicating this is not going to be a normal run-of-the-mill case. It's going to be something that requires some in-depth investigation, and it may not turn out to be a good case, as we call them. When we reviewed the bank records, it indicates that he made a successful deposit of a paycheck, received cash back, and then returned to the same branch approximately 30 minutes later and attempted to withdraw $280, which he knows is over the amount of cash he can receive per day. The theory there would be that either he was being forced to attempt to withdraw these amounts, or he was signaling to the bank, to the computer, for help.
That same night, 2 more attempts were made to withdraw cash. The first was for $200. It was rejected because of insufficient funds. And then, a minute later, $100 was requested. Since Matt's paycheck had not been posted, that request was also denied. Only 11 minutes later, the card was used at another branch in a different neighborhood. Again, the withdrawals were unsuccessful. But this time, a hidden camera took pictures and showed a strange man standing over Matt's right shoulder.
According to these surveillance cameras at the branch, the person standing next to Matt was somewhat shorter, somewhat stockier, and overall he shouldn't have been in the photograph. No one is going to let someone stand that close to him while they're using an ATM machine where they can see the PIN number.
Police fear that Matt may have been abducted by the man in the photograph while he was making his first transactions. Over the next day and a half, there were 5 more withdrawal attempts. By this time, Matt's paycheck had cleared, so $400 was withdrawn from his account. Finally, the card was confiscated by the machine.
We put a freeze on the card, thinking that the police might be able to go get fingerprints off the card.
The card was dusted for prints and none were found. Police believe it was either wiped clean or that Matt's abductor used gloves. Matt's mother and father came down from Oregon to search for their son and for the car he drove to the bank that night.
Picture, would you please call the number, okay?
At first, we had great hopes, I think, that we were going to stumble onto the car somewhere in near proximity of where they lived. I believe after 3 nights of doing this, we became very frustrated.
Los Angeles can be a dangerous place at night. We saw a lot of things that were very frightening, and that only made it more real to us that something perhaps very serious had happened to Matt.
The police had no immediate answers. An attack may have left Matt injured, abducted, or even worse. Undeterred, Matt's roommates, Steve and Teresa, began distributing his picture at a local rescue mission.
I talked to several of the people there, and a couple of the volunteers that worked at the midnight mission said when I showed them just his driver's license, because I'd run out of posters, said, "Oh yes, we have seen him. He's been in here several times eating. He's really," and then they just started to describe him to me, and they said, "He's very tall and thin, isn't he, and very lanky." And I said, "Yes, exactly." And for them to get that from one of those tiny pictures from a driver's license is really miraculous. And we thought, well, wow, they really have seen him, and we thought we were just so close to finding him at that point.
Almost 3 weeks after Matt disappeared, the missing car was found close to where he had vanished.
When they found that car, they ran the license plate via the SVS system, and it indicated that it was associated with a missing person and that I wanted the vehicle held for latent fingerprints. The criminalist dusted it for fingerprints, looked at it for other evidence of a crime, and the car was completely void of fingerprints.
Police found only one clue in the car. It was a blue bandana. Investigators believe that it may have been left by Matt's abductor.
I don't know what happened. I know that I hope none of the things that I've dreamed about and wake up in the night and think about are the things that could have happened to Matt.
We'll never stop looking for him until we find him, and I know we'll find him. He means a lot to me. He's my best friend.
Update. 3 months after he disappeared, the remains of Matt Chase were discovered in a ravine in nearby Pasadena. The cause of his death was a gunshot wound. This is an artist's rendering of the prime suspect in this case, based on computer enhancements of the bank photographs. Coming up, a young couple buys a new house, but no one told them that they'd be sharing it with a gang of restless ghosts. It seemed like a nice house on a nice street in a nice neighborhood. There was nothing extraordinary about it, or so it seemed to the couple who bought it. But then strange noises and even stranger apparitions made them realize that they were not alone. Vancouver, Washington. It was the little things at first. A quiet rattle, a slight chill, the tiniest hint of a presence. Then about 7 months after Ed and Mary Woods moved in,
I've heard the sound of a music box. It was very faint. I went into my husband's office and looked around. There was no sign of anything in there, but I kept hearing it. And it wasn't something I heard in my mind, like you would imagine it. It was an actual sound in the house. I thought somebody had opened up a music box and it was playing.
The first time I had an experience where I noticed something actually happening, I was sitting in my office with the door closed.
Mary had warned Ed that there was something strange about the house. But Ed just assumed that his young daughter was playing a prank.
I thought I'd surprise her by opening the door.
Gotcha.
There was nobody there. I checked and everyone in the house was asleep.
Who or what was stirring up all the trouble? Well, Mary was about to find out.
I actually saw the figure of a woman. She was about my height, wearing a scarf around her head and like a long flannel nightgown. I was not scared of her. I did not get the impression that she was mean. I was not frightened of her. I was just startled by her.
After several encounters, Mary decided to do a little research.
I have been able to identify her through going through records. She was a former resident who had died in the home of cancer. The latter part of her life, towards the end, because of the heavy radiation and chemotherapy, she wore scarves because she had lost all her hair. And she practically lived in flannel nightgowns. I found out later that her children were in the same bedrooms that my children are in. And it could be she's just looking for hers.
The first thing I actually saw was a man standing in the living room. Looked like an old riverboat gambler with a little ribbon tie and a mustache. You look at him twice because you're not too sure if he's going to do something. He never moves, though.
And then there was Pinky.
Pinky is a little girl, 8 to 10 years old. And once in a while, you hear her giggle.
First time, I thought it was our youngest daughter. We'd been sitting in the living room watching movies, and I thought it was my youngest daughter giggling at the movies. So I looked down and realized she had fallen asleep in front of the TV and was sound asleep, so there was no way.
For Ed and Mary, the unearthly visitors were becoming part of their daily life, even in the shower.
Ourselves and many people that have been guests of ours who have taken baths or showers have found themselves accompanied in the shower by a friendly hug and general body rub that seems to be quite female in nature. It doesn't seem to matter if the person taking the shower is male or female. Just somebody's been gone a long time, I think, and missed some of the things that the world had to provide.
As far as the Woods were concerned, there was little doubt that the house was haunted.
Let's go ahead and move down the hallway here. Now, I want you to tell me, both of you tell me just pretty much where the lady in white and where things happen. So
we called in Lloyd Auerbach, a paranormal investigator, to check out the house. Auerbach came armed with an instrument that measures electromagnetic activity.
It was reading next to nothing, literally. It's not a ghost detector by any way, shape, or form. It's a good indicator that there's a physical connection in the environment to their experience that helps validate that they're not completely making it up in their minds. Helps me understand that they're not completely making it up in their minds also. There is some correlation.
He walked all through the house, and in several areas, the magnetometer spiked without explanation.
Okay, now we got a reading again.
In the back bathroom, in the living room.
I'm getting some things in the corner.
And the hallway.
I'm getting actually a high reading again. High energy reading, which I just... This is a very unusual pattern that we're seeing here that seems to relate to the phenomena, or at least to a sensation of it, but doesn't seem to relate to anything else. So I can pretty much rule out the physical environment for causing this.
Right.
You don't have like a generator under the house somewhere, do you?
No. For myself, there was an odd correspondence, I guess, with the spike in the meters, and I'd get a real cold feeling or a chill down the back of my neck, or the hair on my arms would raise up, like goosebumps. It didn't happen all the time, but on several of the occasions, I felt like there was somebody in the room.
No, this one I've seen several times.
Was somebody or something actually there? Perhaps a few unhappy spirits trying to bridge the gap between the dead and the living. Lloyd Auerbach believes it's possible, but by no means definite. Ed and Mary Woods, however, have gone from wondering to believing. Next, a mentally unstable young man disappears, and his family fears the worst. Oak Park, Illinois.
Today is August 29th, right?
This is Jim Kimball at the age of 18. At 15, he was diagnosed with a severe psychological disorder. At 24, 6 years after this home video was shot, Jim disappeared. But that was all still to come. Growing up, Jim was the sixth child in a large and loving family.
Well, ever since Jim was young, he was always on the shyer side and maybe more sensitive than other people.
You never expected any trouble when Jim was around. He was pretty special.
Friends, we have gathered here to remember the life of Donald.
When he was just 13, Jim's father suddenly died of a heart attack.
Our grieving hearts are saddened that the breath of life...
Jim seems very quiet, and he didn't really show a lot of emotion. The rest of us were all upset and absorbed in our own grief. I noticed he didn't seem to really be crying or carrying on. Maybe he was holding a lot of his emotions inside, and he wasn't expressing himself.
This was just the first sign that something was terribly wrong. But at the time, the family was consumed with grief and didn't notice. In fact, Jim was holding his emotions inside, and he was wrestling with a severe mental disorder which would erupt almost 3 years to the day after his father's death. As teenagers, Jim and his brothers formed their own garage band. Jim played the drums.
Hold it, Jim, come on. Gotta have something steady from you. You're all over the place.
What's going on, Jim? Hey, what's with you, man? Jim, are you okay?
He was acting strange, and I was afraid for him. It came to a point where it was like, we better bring him to the hospital or something, because we didn't know what he was going to do next.
You don't seem to be too sure of anything.
No. It's all a waste of time. It's not like it used to be.
Jim was diagnosed with a mental illness, a form of manic depression characterized by strange thoughts and severe mood swings.
He'll never come back.
Was this some friend of yours?
He was confused. He indicated that he had heard some voices, that he had both sorrow and certainly anger with his father's death.
I think maybe they never did.
Jim required medication to control his condition. The next 8 years were full of hospitalizations, relapses, and recoveries. But Jim somehow managed to graduate from high school and hold a few jobs. Eventually, he moved into a nearby halfway house. One Easter weekend, Jim showed up at his mother's house earlier than expected.
Well, your brother could have picked you up later.
Yeah, no, I wanted to come home.
Pretty surprised that he would go through all that trouble to walk home, you know. All the family was together. We had a nice turkey dinner for Easter. Everything seemed to be pretty good.
But all of that changed the very next day when Jim became frustrated with the family's new stereo system.
And I was having lunch, and I heard from downstairs a commotion.
I don't like this house. You guys keep changing things.
Well, if you got a problem with the stereo, I mean, let's talk about it, you know? I mean, you don't have to throw a temper tantrum. I mean, are you 5 years old?
No, I'm 4. Get out of my face, you idiot.
And I said, hey, you know, if you're not feeling well, you should go to the hospital. But he said that he wasn't gonna go to the hospital. He'd take care of things. So we cleaned things up, and then he left, and that was the last I saw him.
Jim vanished. The Kimballs launched a frantic search of the neighborhood.
Yeah, we could try Steve's, the community living center.
He didn't have any medication with him. He had no money, no coat. It was rather cold out. And it just almost seemed that he went and just took a walk and never came back.
The family made phone calls, searched homeless shelters, and distributed missing persons flyers all across the country. 11 months went by with no sign of Jim. The first promising lead came from South Bend, Indiana, some 90 miles from Jim's home in Oak Park.
Sir, could you come here for a minute, please? Have you had anything to drink today?
Nope.
Why don't you have a seat in the car?
He appeared to be under the influence. But the result of the test showed 0-0 on the alcohol sensor.
Okay, you're 0-0. I'd prefer if you were gonna hitchhike.
When I saw the flyer, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks later, the picture on the flyer matched the description of the individual I had spoke with.
It really worries me that he's out there and might not be able to take care of himself. We really want to have Jim back with us. We want him to know that we love him and care about him and want to help him through his problems.
Jim's family is still searching for him, and they're worried that without medication, he will never find his way home. Jim Kimball is 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighs 165 pounds. He has green eyes, and his brown hair may still be long and parted in the middle. Coming up, the ashes of an unknown woman are discovered on an isolated California island. Kansas City, Missouri. This is Julie Cooper. With her is Tim Santee, the man who rescued her from a childhood that she says was a living nightmare. When Julie was just 6 years old, her parents joined a religious cult called the Decloud family. The leader of the sect was a charismatic ex-police officer named Nelson Decloud.
White in the blood of the Lamb.
Nelson thought that he was God's son. Not really that he was Jesus Christ, but that he was one of God's sons and that he couldn't do any wrong.
Julie says that by the time she was 10, Decloud was demanding to have sex with her.
What I want you to do, Julie, is what God wants you to do. You understand me?
Yes.
All right.
According to Julie, she initially refused, but eventually the pressure became so great that she gave in.
Now you listen to me. Do you know how old Mary was when she had Jesus?
And he says, well, are you ready now? Of course, you know, after all that had happened, I just said, yes,
Julie claims that over the next 12 years, Decloud humiliated, emotionally tortured, and forced her into sexual slavery. Finally, one fall day, Julie made her escape, helped by Tim Santi, an electronics repairman. They had met when Tim visited the compound to work on Decloud's satellite dish.
Last Thursday, I called my friend Tim to come.
Tim encouraged Julie to go to the police. They immediately issued a warrant for Decloud's arrest. But before he could be captured, Decloud and his followers disappeared.
I want Nelson to get caught because it's not fair to anyone else that's up there. My mom and dad, they need to know that he isn't the Messiah. He is a criminal. What he was doing was wrong.
Update. After Julie's story aired, several viewers from San Angelo, Texas, called us to say that they had seen Decloud's wife in the area. The cult had settled in this farmhouse. When state and local agents swarmed the area, Decloud kicked out the screen of the upstairs window and tried to escape.
The deputies approached him, and he tried to wrestle with a few of them briefly. There were so many law enforcement officers, though, that that didn't last very long. They put the handcuffs on him and escorted him out of the building.
Nelson Decloud was booked at the local county jail and later brought back to Liberty, Missouri, where he stood trial on 4 criminal counts, including forcible rape and sodomy. He was sentenced to spend 220 years in a Missouri prison. Santa Cruz Island, California. Dr. Cary Stanton was a fascinating eccentric, a lifelong bachelor, and a member of a wealthy California family. After he graduated from Stanford Medical School, Stanton practiced as a pathologist in New York City. Then, when he was just 34 years old, he left New York and returned to California to run the family cattle ranch. It was not a typical ranch. Stanton's family owned 9/10 of Santa Cruz Island. At 62,000 acres, it is the largest of California's Channel Islands. When Dr. Stanton's parents died, he took over.
Cary Stanton was very protective of Santa Cruz Island. He used to say that this island was not his, it was just a responsibility that was handed down to him from his parents. There was one instance in which he was walking down a beach and he came across a very large bag of trash. He actually went through the bag until he found an envelope. And on this envelope was the name and address of a very prominent yacht broker in Ventura. So Cary Stanton left the island with this trash bag, drove up to the yacht broker in Ventura to whom this trash had obviously belonged, and he deposited it on the man's desk and said, "Excuse me, sir, I believe you left this on my island."
For Dr. Stanton, Santa Cruz Island was heaven on earth. He established a private cemetery exclusively for those he felt had an important connection to the island. There were 14 graves surrounding the ranch chapel. Then, one December day, the number increased by 1. Dr. Cary Stanton died at the age of 64. Dr. Stanton left the entire ranch to the Nature Conservancy.
Marla, come on over here a second.
One afternoon, an official from Santa Barbara County discovered an old metal box in a shed on the ranch.
Take a look at this. What do you think?
And I looked in the box and it was full of ashes, and I recognized the ashes as being those of a human remains.
Let's pour these out and see what we can find.
No one on the island knew anything about the mysterious ashes. However, the local coroner found a few intriguing clues. A snap-like clothing fastener made in the 1940s, several false teeth from the 1950s, and a diamond-studded platinum ring dating back before World War II.
We believe that it's an elderly female victim based upon the findings of the arthritic changes of the bones
and the characteristic of that one particular wrist bone that appeared to be female.
Was Dr. Cary Stanton the keeper of a dark secret? Not likely. He was known as a compulsive archivist who meticulously labeled everything.
It is very unlike Cary Stanton to have the loose end, in particular, of human remains left on Santa Cruz Island. It's not something that he would do.
So who was this mysterious woman, and how did her ashes end up in a metal box in a small shed on this remote island? All we know is that she died sometime after World War II and that she was older than 50. She also suffered from a slight arthritic condition and wore a platinum and diamond eternity ring.
The Santa Cruz Island Foundation doesn't know what to do with her, and we very much would like to do the right thing and find a place where she belongs. And if it's on the island, we would like to see that she's added to the cemetery if she belongs here. We want to do the right thing to make sure that these ashes receive a final resting place which is appropriate.